The annual Johnson family reunion was held at Golden Fork's flagship restaurant in downtown Chicago, just like it had been for the past 7 years. Nearly 300 relatives filled the private upstairs dining hall, surrounded by polished mahogany walls and glittering crystal chandeliers that reflected the success of Golden Fork Enterprises, now considered the most prosperous restaurant chain in the Midwest. I sat quietly at table 12, nudging my piece of salmon around the plate, already anticipating what was coming. It was dessert time, which meant my father had reached the perfect level of confidence after his third generous pour of wine. The waitstaff had just placed slices of Golden Fork's famous chocolate soufflé in front of us, the rich aroma of cocoa mixing with the hum of proud conversation that filled the room. "You know what I love most about these reunions?" Dad announced loudly to our table of 8, his voice carrying just enough to attract attention from nearby cousins. "Getting to see how far the family business has come. Just take a look around. This is what genuine success looks like." My cousin Derek, who oversaw Golden Fork's marketing division, lifted his wine glass with a grin. "Grandpa Joe had the vision," he said proudly. 23 locations across 4 states, and we're only gaining momentum." Glasses clinked all around the table, and several relatives joined in with enthusiastic cheers. My Aunt Rebecca, head of human resources for the company, leaned forward with a radiant smile. "The Ohio expansion has exceeded expectations. We're launching 3 additional restaurants this quarter alone." There was admiration in her voice, the kind that came from being deeply invested in something that was both business and family legacy. At that moment, my Uncle Mike from Golden Fork Co. rose from his seat and tapped his spoon against his glass, signaling for the room's attention. Conversations gradually faded as he addressed the crowd. "Family, thank you all for being here tonight. Golden Fork is more than just a company. It's a heritage, built by Johnsons, managed by Johnsons, owned by Johnsons." The room erupted into applause. Whistles echoed from the back tables, and someone shouted, "Hear, hear!" Then Uncle Mike's eyes landed on me. "Of course," he continued with a thin smile, "not everyone in the family feels called to the entrepreneurial life. Some prefer something a bit more modest." The shift in attention was immediate. Heads turned in my direction. I was dressed the way I always dressed for these events, a plain black dress from Target and comfortable flats from Payless. My position as a library assistant within the Chicago Public Library system was not exactly headline material in a room that measured achievement in revenue and expansion charts. Dad didn't miss the opportunity. Take my daughter Emily, for example. 28 years old and never once expressed interest in joining the business. Perfectly content stamping books and scanning returns for the rest of her days. My cousin Sarah, who managed the financial side of Golden Fork, laughed softly. "Not everyone thrives under the pressure of real enterprise, Uncle Tom. It takes a particular type of person to create something significant." Dad nodded as if he had confirmed a long-held theory. "Exactly. Emily's always been comfortable following rather than leading. Some people are simply better suited for service-oriented roles." I continued eating my chocolate soufflé, letting the rich sweetness dissolve slowly while their words floated around me. This was not new territory. For nearly a decade, every reunion had featured some version of this narrative. "The restaurant industry demands foresight," Uncle Mike added, warming up again. "Strategic planning, calculated risk-taking, financial expertise. You have to grasp market trends, customer behavior, and operational logistics." Derek jumped in eagerly. "And let's not forget managing investor partnerships. Golden Fork wouldn't be what it is without our advanced funding structure." I nearly coughed on my dessert at that point, though I disguised it with a sip of water. Dad leaned back in his chair, fully settled into his role as commentator on my shortcomings. "That's what I've tried to explain to Emily year after year. Business requires drive. It requires hunger. It's not a field for the faint-hearted." Aunt Rebecca offered a patronizing nod. "Some individuals simply find comfort in supporting capacities, and that's all right. Libraries serve a purpose too." The implication hung in the air, thick and unmistakable. My cousin Kevin, head of purchasing for Golden Fork, lifted his glass once more. To those in this family who dared to take risks, who understood that wealth is built by stepping out of comfort zones. More applause followed, more admiration for their collective boldness and brilliance. Finally, Dad turned toward me with a look that combined expectation and mild disappointment. Emily, you really ought to reconsider your path. Library work is acceptable for the time being, but it doesn't lead anywhere substantial. There's no upward trajectory, no real financial growth. Without initiative, you'll never succeed in business. Every face at the table focused on me, waiting for acknowledgement, waiting for agreement, waiting for me to accept their version of my future. I carefully set down my fork and offered a pleasant smile. You're absolutely right, Dad. I should probably leave the success to my cousins. That seemed to satisfy them. Several relatives nodded in approval, reassured by my apparent acceptance. Kevin even reached over to pat my shoulder. That's mature of you, Emily. Recognizing your strengths and limitations is important. Entrepreneurship isn't for everyone. I excused myself quietly, rising from the table and making my way across the expansive dining room. Laughter and animated conversations echoed off the polished walls. Relatives toasted each other's promotions and expansions. Around me, Golden Fork employees moved seamlessly between tables, refilling coffee cups, clearing away dessert plates, and maintaining the flawless service that had made the company famous. What none of them knew was that I'd been watching their operations very carefully for 7 years. Every menu change, every location expansion, every staffing decision. Because while my family saw me as the simple librarian who couldn't understand business complexity, I'd actually been Golden Fork's largest investor since 2016. Through a network of investment vehicles managed by Meridian Capital Partners, I owned 78% of Golden Fork Enterprises. The initial investment had been $50 million for my inheritance, money my grandmother had left me in a trust that my father had somehow never learned about. Over 7 years, as Golden Fork expanded and grew, my position had increased to $200 million. Every major decision the family had made about their restaurant chain had ultimately been approved by my representatives on Golden Fork's board of directors. Every expansion, every renovation, every strategic initiative had been funded with my money, while my father explained to relatives why I'd never amount to anything in business. I called my fund manager, Patricia Chin, from the restaurant's bathroom.
Patricia, it's Emily. I need to initiate liquidation procedures for the Golden Fork Enterprises position. Emily, that's a significant holding. Are you certain about this timing? The Q3 numbers look very strong. I'm certain. I want everything pulled. Complete liquidation within 30 days. There was a pause. This will trigger the majority shareholder dissolution clause. The board will need to be notified immediately. Are you prepared for that level of exposure? I thought about my father's voice explaining to the table why I'd never amount to anything in business. I'm prepared. Send the notifications. Emily, I have to point out that this decision will essentially destroy the company. Golden Fork's operational capital comes entirely from your funding structure. Without continued investment, they'll be insolvent within 60 days. I understand the implications. This seems like an emotional response to something. Maybe we should schedule a meeting to discuss. Patricia, I've been monitoring Golden Fork's financial metrics for 2 years. Their expansion rate is unsustainable. They're opening new locations faster than they can train competent management. Customer satisfaction scores have been declining across all markets. They're spending money like they have unlimited access to capital, which was true until today. This was all accurate. While my family celebrated their business acumen, they'd been making increasingly poor operational decisions. Too much expansion, too little quality control, too many hired managers who didn't understand Golden Fork's service standards. If you're certain, Patricia said, I'll begin the liquidation process. The board notification will go out within 2 hours. Perfect. And Patricia, make sure the documentation clearly identifies that this decision comes from Temps River Holdings. I want the board to understand exactly who's been funding their operations. Temps River Holdings. Tage, Tom's, Rebecca's Holdings. Named after my parents. A little joke I'd been enjoying privately for 7 years. I returned to the dining room where dessert was winding down and coffee was being served. The family was still discussing Golden Fork's bright future. The Nashville expansion is going to be huge, Derek was saying. We've identified 12 prime locations for the next 18 months. Uncle Mike nodded enthusiastically. The Southeast market has been underserved for fine dining chains. Golden Fork is positioned to dominate that space. I sat down and sipped my coffee while they planned their empire's continued growth with money that would disappear in approximately 48 hours. My phone buzzed with a text from Patricia. Board notification sent. Expect response within 4 to 6 hours. The reunion concluded around 10 p.m. with the traditional group photo in front of Golden Fork's logo. 300 family members arranged in rows, all smiling proudly in front of the restaurant that represented their collective success. I stood in the back row next to my cousins who managed various aspects of the business they thought they owned. The next morning, I was reshelving returns in the library's fiction section when my phone started ringing. Uncle Mike. I let it go to voicemail. Then Derek called. Then Aunt Rebecca. By lunchtime, I had 11 missed calls and 14 text messages. Uncle Mike's voicemail. Emily, something very strange has happened. Our primary investor has pulled out of Golden Fork. I don't understand what's going on, but we need to have an emergency family meeting. Derek's text. Have you heard about the Golden Fork situation? Someone called Temps River Holdings just liquidated their entire position. We're trying to figure out who they are. Aunt Rebecca's voicemail. Emily, I know you're not involved in the business side of things, but we're having a crisis with our funding. Can you call me back? I deleted the messages and continued with my work. The afternoon children's reading program was starting in an hour, and I needed to set up the activity stations. At 3 p.m., while I was reading Green Eggs and Ham to 15 preschoolers, my phone buzzed with an emergency text from Dad. Family meeting tonight, 7 p.m. at Mike's house. Golden Fork emergency. Everyone must attend. I typed back, I have to work late tonight. Library inventory. Dad responded immediately.
This is more important than books, Emily. The family business is in crisis. I'm not part of the family business, remember? He said I should leave the success to my cousins. He didn't respond to that. The emergency meeting happened without me, but I got updates throughout the week from various family members who couldn't believe I wasn't more concerned about Golden Fork's situation. Mom called Wednesday morning. Emily, your father is beside himself. Apparently, this Temps River Holdings company owned most of Golden Fork and just decided to sell everything. No warning, no negotiation. They have 60 days to find new funding or close all the restaurants. That sounds complicated, I said. I'm sure Uncle Mike will figure something out. He's very good at business. But where are they going to find $200 million in 60 days? And why would an investor just walk away from a profitable company? I thought about how to answer that. Maybe they had reasons we don't understand. Thursday, Derek called. Emily, I know you're not involved in the restaurant business, but do you know anyone who might be interested in investing in Golden Fork? We're reaching out to everyone we can think of. I don't really move in investment circles, Derek. I'm just a librarian, remember? Right, but maybe through the library system. Maybe some of your patrons are business people. I almost laughed. I'll keep an ear out. Friday afternoon, Uncle Mike himself called. Emily, I'm going to ask you something that might sound crazy, but Temps River Holdings, those initials are TR. Your parents' names are Tom and Rebecca. Is there any chance, this is going to sound insane, but is there any chance you know something about this company? I was quiet for a long moment. Uncle Mike, that does sound insane. Where would I get $200 million to invest in restaurants? I know. It's just that the timing is so strange. The liquidation happened the day after the reunion, right after... He trailed off. Right after what? Right after your father made those comments about your career choices. You think I destroyed the family business because Dad hurt my feelings? No, of course not. I told you it was crazy. I'm just grasping at straws here. 2 weeks later, Golden Fork Enterprises filed for bankruptcy protection. Without Thames River Holdings' continued funding, they couldn't maintain operations across 23 locations. The restaurants began closing one by one, starting with the newest locations that hadn't yet established strong customer bases. The family was devastated. Uncle Mike had to lay off more than 400 employees. Derek, Sarah, and Kevin all lost their management positions. Aunt Rebecca had to liquidate her retirement savings to cover personal expenses. Dad called me 3 times during this period, each conversation more desperate than the last. Emily, I don't understand how this happened. We had such a strong business model. We were profitable. We had expansion plans. Maybe the investor had other priorities, I suggested. But who just walks away from a profitable restaurant chain? It doesn't make business sense. I wouldn't know, Dad. I don't understand business complexity, remember? The final blow came 6 weeks after the reunion. The Chicago Tribune ran an article about Golden Fork's bankruptcy. Local restaurant chain collapses after major investor withdrawal. The article included interviews with several family members who expressed confusion about Thames River Holdings' motivations. Uncle Mike was quoted, "We never understood why they decided to liquidate. The company was profitable and growing. It seemed like a purely arbitrary decision." Derek added, "Thames River Holdings never communicated with us directly. Everything went through lawyers and fund managers. We still don't know who they really were or why they walked away." I read the article during my lunch break at the library, sitting in the staff room with my sandwich and coffee. That evening, Dad called, one final time. "Emily, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Okay." "At the reunion, when I was talking about your career, when I said you'd never amount to anything in business, were you upset about that?" I thought carefully about how to answer. "Dad, you've been saying things like that my entire adult life. If I got upset every time you dismissed my potential, I'd never stop being upset. But this time was different. This time was in front of the whole family, in front of everyone." It was. And the next day, our investor pulled out. Coincidences happen. There was a long silence. "Emily, Thames River Holdings, TR, Tom and Rebecca's initials. I noticed that too. Is there something you're not telling me?" I looked around my small apartment, at the library books stacked on my coffee table, at the simple furniture I'd bought from IKEA, the apartment that cost me $1,200 a month while I had $47 million sitting in various investment accounts. "Dad, you've spent 10 years explaining to everyone that I don't understand business, that I'm not ambitious enough for entrepreneurship, that I should leave success to my cousins. Why would you think I'd be capable of secretly owning a restaurant chain?" Because I'm starting to think I might have been wrong about you." This was the first time in my adult life that my father had admitted being wrong about anything related to my capabilities. "What makes you think that?" "Because someone with enough money to destroy a $200 million company overnight would have to be very, very smart and very, very patient and very, very strategic." I didn't respond immediately. "Emily, are you Thames River Holdings?" I sat down my coffee and walked to my window, looking out at the Chicago skyline. In the distance, I could see the building that had housed Golden Fork's corporate headquarters until they'd lost their lease last week. "Dad, if I were Thames River Holdings, that would mean I'd spent 7 years secretly funding the family business while you told everyone I was too stupid to understand entrepreneurship.
Yes, that would mean I sat through dozens of family gatherings listening to you mock my career while I was actually the person paying everyone's salaries. Yes, that would mean I have access to the kind of money and financial expertise that you've always said I was too simple to understand. Yes, and that would mean you've been completely wrong about my capabilities for my entire adult life. There was a very long silence. Finally, Dad said, Emily, are you Thames River Holdings? Dad, what do you think? Another silence. Then, I think I owe you the biggest apology of my life. Yes, you do. And I think I've been an idiot. Yes, you have. And I think you just taught me the most expensive lesson I've ever learned. I smiled, looking out at the city lights. Business lessons are always expensive, Dad. The good ones, anyway. 3 months later, the family was still recovering from Golden Fork's collapse. Most of my cousins had found new jobs, though none at the management level they'd been accustomed to. Uncle Mike was working as a consultant for other restaurant chains, trying to rebuild his professional reputation. Dad and I started having monthly dinners together, just the two of us. We never talked directly about Thames River Holdings, but the dynamic between us had changed completely. He asked about my work at the library with genuine interest. He asked about my thoughts on business news and financial markets. He treated me like someone whose opinions mattered. During one of these dinners, he said, Emily, I've been thinking about what happened with Golden Fork. Oh, about whether the family could have done anything differently, whether we could have maintained the relationship with our investor. I thought about this. Probably. Investors usually want to feel valued and respected. They want to know that their contributions are appreciated instead of taken for granted. Dad nodded slowly. Good investors are hard to find. Smart money doesn't just disappear without reason. Usually not. So if a family had an investor who'd been supporting them for years, they should probably treat that person very well. Probably. Even if that person seemed unassuming on the surface. Especially if that person seemed unassuming on the surface. We ate in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Dad said, Emily, I don't know if you'll ever tell me the complete truth about what happened with Golden Fork. Maybe someday. But I want you to know that regardless of what the truth is, I'm proud of you. I'm proud of your work at the library. I'm proud of your intelligence. I'm proud of your strategic thinking abilities. I smiled. Thank you, Dad. And if you ever decide to get involved in business ventures in the future, I hope you'll consider letting your old man participate. Maybe as a junior partner, someone who listens more and talks less. I thought about this offer, about whether our relationship was ready for that level of partnership. I'll keep that in mind, I said. 6 months later, I made my first open investment under my own name, a small, independent bookstore in my neighborhood that was struggling with rent increases. Emily Johnson, investor and strategic advisor. The owner, Mrs. Chin, was surprised when I offered to help. Are you sure you understand the retail book business? It's quite complex. I smiled. I'm a quick learner. The bookstore thrived under new management and expanded to include a cafe and event space. Mrs. Chin often told customers that her success was due to finding the right investor at the right time, someone who understood the business and treated me with respect, she'd say. That's the most important thing in any partnership. And sometimes when Dad visited the bookstore, I'd catch him smiling as he listened to Mrs. Chin explain her business philosophy. He never said anything, but I could tell he was connecting the dots between my approach to investing and whatever lessons he'd learned from the Golden Fork experience. Because the best business lessons are the ones that teach you to recognize talent and wisdom wherever you find it.